Meeting to order. This is the McCracken County Fiscal Court meeting, October 10, 2022. McCracken County Courthouse Courtroom D. And Madam Clerk, hello.
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Parker?
Here.
Commissioner Bartleman?
Here.
And Judge Clymer?
Here. Commissioner Bartleman, we offer a prayer, please.
Father, we thank you for the blessings of this day. We thank you for the opportunity we have to gather here to protect the business of this county. We pray you be with us as we make the decisions, that they be good in your light and good in the light of the citizens of this county. Father, as we always do, we pray for our first responders and give them the safety that they need and the protection they need as they go about protecting the citizens of this county. Father, we're so thankful for what you do for us. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, and stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, now, first is a consent agenda.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion on the consent agenda? All right, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. Budget transfers.
It is ordered that the necessary cash transfers amount from Fiscal Court September 26, 2022 be amended to state the amount of $620,000.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
It is ordered that the necessary cash transfers in the amount of $190,000 be made in order to pay county bills and payroll approved October 10, 2022.
So made.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. Accounts payable.
It is ordered to approve the voucher claims register from September 26, 2022 to October 10, 2022 to show county bills in the amount of $482,496.54 were paid.
So made.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. All right, and then under discussion, we have E911. Let's see. I don't know what what item do we have to discuss about 911, Steve?
We were going to disclose what is in the proposed RFP that is preparing to go out.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll go ahead with that.
So, no big surprise with the what's in the RFP people is for the purchase of a new radio system, primarily for the use of people in public safety at both city, county, and other agencies across the county in the 700 or 800 megahertz system, a P25 compliant system, meaning Project 25 was a set of standards developed nationally for people in law enforcement and first responders like fire, EMS, emergency management to have a really important thing called interoperability, the ability for diverse agencies to be able to talk to each other, because everyone used to have their own standards of communication on the local level. So we're buying a P20, or we're asking for a P25 compliant system. We're asking for the development of potentially new towers, because what the RFP asks for is 95% coverage basically across the entire county. We do not believe we can get that with the existing collection of assets owned by the city and county. Between the city owns one tower, the county owns two towers. Quite possibly to meet the goal of 95% will require either additional towers that are existing to be utilized and or the development of what we call a greenfield site, the building of a new one. We're putting that analysis on proposers because they have to stand behind our system will cover 95% of the county. It includes something we don't have now, and that's a backhaul network, so that we can avoid single points of failure. If we have a point of failure, like for example on the city tower, that would knock us out of communications. So there'll be a designed either fiber loop or microwave backhaul that if you lose a tower, the other towers will keep the ring complete. And it asks for pricing on new mobiles and new portables. Many of the ones that we, the county, have and across the community are part of an older system that belong to the city or county that are functionally obsolete, and many of those need to be replaced. So that's basically it. It takes 130 pages to say that in great detail of exactly what we're asking for. The work that has been put towards that is substantially complete. I think the committee will meet at least one more time before that thing is ready to go out. Now, whether or not it goes out is another thing, but we're at that stage where that could go out. Our consultants say these will be on the street, I think, for 90 to 120 days. And so probably sometime in the first quarter of the next calendar year, we'll have hard bids in. And we know we will, given the size, scope of the project, we'll have good national interest in our project.
Any questions,
Will we
comments?
get a copy of the RFP at some point?
You sure will. As soon as it's complete, I expect that will be probably in talking with Travis LePage of Federal Engineering, probably in the next couple of weeks.
So the plan is this, we'll approve it before it actually gets submitted.
That's up to you.
I told the city we wanted to look at it before it goes out.
I think that makes sense.
Agree.
And Bill?
Good.
All right. Anything else? All
Thanks,
right,
sir.
thanks, Steve.
Steve, we'll have that in plenty of time to look at. I mean, not that we'll understand all the technology that's in there, but we'll have that in plenty of time to review it before we
Yes, sir.
get into a meeting. I mean, we're not going to get it on Friday to absorb by a Monday, are we?
As soon as you get it, as soon as I get it, we'll
Okay.
push it out.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, then we have the sports park, Elizabethtown, Steve Doolittle and I and Steve, well, it wasn't, Steve didn't go, it was Randy Williams. Randy Williams went. Randy's on the working group. Steve Irvin and Randy Williams are on the working group, and so Randy Williams went with us. Steve was not able to go, Steve Irvin. But we toured the facility there for several hours. Got a lot of good information, just sort of so we would know what we're looking at when we build ours out. There were some things that they do that we might not do. Some things, most things we probably would, but so I think it was a very good trip to get information, and a lot of details, but that's essentially it. And I think we're on our way. We did get the interlocal agreement approved by the state, and so the work can really begin in earnest now, and making some progress toward getting this done and a fine facility for the community in the region. That's all I want to say about that, really. Anything about that?
Look forward to it.
All right, and then we have 5A, table from previous meeting.
Need the motion to take it off the table.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion on taking it from the table? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Both no. All right. So, will you read the
Yes. It is ordered that pursuant to an amendment in the bylaws of the Paducah-McCracken County Convention Center Board, the following board members will be reappointed with the terms beginning July 1, 2022. Bill Bartleman, Andrew McGlennon, John Mann, Tom Paget, Alexandra Sherwood.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just want to thank each of the five for their service. I know they've put up with me for a little bit. I think we have made some changes since the beginning of the year on the business model of the convention center, and didn't get everything I wanted, but close enough for government work. We've made a lot of changes, actually. When we started this year, the board members actually elected themselves, and now we've moved to a position where the county judge and the mayor appoint with the approval of the fiscal court and the commission. And I think that's a significant and needed change, although these people were doing a very, very good job.
Anything else?
Let me, in response to your concerns, Commissioner Jones, the Convention Board we haven't officially approved it yet, but we discussed some of the concerns that you had, and they have informally discussed agreeing to your request that there be a 60 or 90-day notice when bylaws are going to be changed. If they want to change the bylaws to take away the confirmation of the appointments, they have to give the fiscal court at least a 60 to 90-day notice that that's going to happen. Also, they agreed if you think it needs to be done, set up the model similar to the JSA, that one of the appointments to the board will be a city commissioner, and one appointment will be a county commissioner. Right now, I'm on there as just a kind of a at-large appointee, but they're agreeable to amending the bylaws to have one of the seats on there, or two of the seats on there, one a city commissioner, one a county commissioner. So that has not been formally approved. That was discussed, and there seemed to be consensus that we're willing to do that.
Cool.
Any other discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. Court orders.
It is ordered to approve the September transient room tax in the amount of $380,090.73 to be dispersed as follows. Paducah CVB, $112,043.11. Convention Center, $75,799.89. Sports Tourism Commission, $115,349.96. Escrow Fund, $76,897.77.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. Number 7, the ordinance, first reading.
It is hereby ordered that pursuant to KRS Chapter 67, the first reading of ordinance number 2022-07 be conducted in summary format as follows. McCracken County, Kentucky, McCracken County Fiscal Court, ordinance number 2022-07. An ordinance amending McCracken County ordinance number 2022-02 by making revisions to the proposed fiscal year 2022-2023 operating budget by modifications in receipts from insurance proceeds and miscellaneous in strict compliance with the mandates of Kentucky Revised Statutes Chapter 68. Summary. The present ordinance makes revisions to Ordinance 2022-02, McCracken County Proposed Fiscal Court 2022-2023 operating budget pertaining to a modification in receipts from insurance proceeds and miscellaneous. Certification. It is hereby certified by the McCracken County Fiscal Court that the present summary represents an accurate official statement of the main points and contents of ordinance number 2022-07. Public inspection. Ordinance number 2022-07 shall be available for public inspection in its whole and complete form in the McCracken County Judge Executive's office during ordinary business hours.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
Judge, before we take up the next item, before we spend time reading 2 pages of this summary, I think there's going to be a motion to table this. Do we still need to read the entire summary, or can we avoid that if we're going to table it?
Now, we can take the motion to table it, see where we go before we read it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to avoid having to read the whole thing now and then do it
Yeah.
again in 2 weeks.
So you're moving to,
I'll make a motion that we table item B, summary of the ordinance for the bond issue.
yeah, this,
Second.
okay, discussion? Is there a reason you're going to give for?
Yeah, I think in discussion, I think that there's some questions that we want answered before we obligate ourselves to a $3 million bond issue. Number one is we have requested in the past, and we just got it tonight, a summary of all the expenses of the construction of the airport. Under the interlocal agreement, I thought we were supposed to receive that some months ago, but we just got that tonight. And I'm curious as to, in the expenses, early on, there were some parts of this project that were coming in under budget, and there were some I know that probably came in over budget. I want to see a summary of the estimates of the different aspects of the construction plan and what the estimates were and what the actual bids were and whether or not there were bid changes to add things to the project. So we just got that tonight. We haven't had time to look over it. Secondly, I think there's a chance that the state legislature approved a $3 or $4 million bond issue to help fund projects at the airport. There was a list that was tentatively approved of it wasn't part of the legislation, but there was a list of projects that were going to be funded. At least one of those projects will be funded in part by a grant that was announced by the Delta Regional Authority last week and will be announced by the governor's putting out a news release tomorrow on that. And that will save some of the money that's in the list of projects that at least one legislator wanted to fund for the airport in the future. Also, since all this began, the federal government has approved an infrastructure grant program that puts, I think, well over $20 billion for different aspects of airport construction. And I think there was a briefing on this in Washington. I think Commissioner Jones mentioned. I was at a meeting in Denver, the National Association of Counties, where they went over some of these things. There's a lot of money in there that would free up some money for some future airport projects. It probably won't affect the terminal construction, but it could still free up some of the money that at least one legislator has earmarked for airport projects. So I think we really need to know whether or not some of that money that's in the state grant, whether that can somehow be whether that can be used for the terminal construction to help reduce what our obligation is and what the city's obligation is. There's a meeting, there's going to be a meeting in Frankfurt in 2 weeks where we're going to meet with the Transportation Secretary and the head of the aeronautics for the state to kind of discuss whether or not some of this money can be used for the terminal project. So I think before we approve the $3 million bond issue, we need to have a better handle on exactly how much money we're going to need. That's why I want to pass over it or table it.
Okay.
I guess we didn't because we're tabling and nobody knows exactly what it was, but it's basically an ordinance to borrow $3 million for our share of the airport terminal construction project. The city did $3 million, we're doing $3 million as part of a $6 million local match that the governor in his budget address tried to take away from both the city and McCracken County, but that didn't make it through the legislature.
So are we, so this is for our first reading. If we don't do the first reading tonight, then we would do it possibly as earliest would be, what is it, 24th? Is that our next meeting?
Yes, sir.
For the first reading, and then the actual adoption, if it gets passed, is November 14, maybe? Is that our? Yeah, November 14. Does that put us any kind of time crunch, Steve? Or?
Well, all that is true, Commissioner, but bills are starting to come in because this work is contracted.
I get it. We obligated, we signed an agreement to do it.
We have an interlocal.
The governor tried to take that cross from us, but the legislature didn't go along with that. And there's a long discussion to be had about that. But anyway, it's water under the bridge, I guess.
Well, I think to what Commissioner Bartleman was saying, in the design of this debt, Mark Rawlings is here, and I'd like him to speak to the different ways we looked at. Certainly one of the things we, in discussing it with Mark and the design of it, was I want to borrow $2.8 million and then find out later I don't need it. What am I going to do with it? Not that we don't have other future capital things that we could roll it into. I don't want to sit on it for 2 years waiting for those things to happen. So there were sort of 3 different approaches that were discussed, and Mark could summarize those.
Sure, and as Steve alluded to, we looked at first and foremost the traditional method, which would be a capital markets general obligation bond issue sold by the county. This has several drawbacks, chiefly that they're pretty rigid with how early you can pay them off. Let's say that we issued the debt 6 months from now, we found out that the state was going to come through with the money for us, and we were hung with a $3 million bond issue. So that was sort of not super desirable. We also looked at sort of a drawdown construction loan that would convert to fixed rate financing at the end of the construction period. The problem with this one is that we're in a rising interest rate environment. The banks generally that I spoke to generally wouldn't commit to a fixed rate during construction, so you have a variable rate of interest during the construction draw period. They also wouldn't fix the rate of interest on the long-term takeout until the end of construction. When you're in a rising interest rate environment, that exposes you to quite a bit of interest rate risk where, 6 months from now, a year from now, interest rates could be considerably higher than they already are. So the third one, and the one that we intend to go out with, assuming that you guys approve the ordinance, would be a bank financing that is prepayable anytime. It would fully fund the $3 million up front. And I'm going to speak to why that's not necessarily a bad thing in the current interest rate environment in a moment. But maintaining the flexibility to pay it off anytime, so that if in 3 months, in 6 months, a year from now, we do get funding for the project, then we can pay this thing off immediately with no penalty, and then you're only out the interest that you've paid to that point. The other benefit of borrowing the full $3 million up front is that, yes, interest rates are high, but that also means that when you get a lump sum, you can invest that at a fairly substantial rate of interest. A year ago, you might have gotten 15 basis points, 30 basis points on a deposit. We can probably get north of 3%. So if we issue the debt and with that prepayable any time, I'm expecting an interest rate somewhere around 4% in that vicinity. But you can reinvest that $3 million at a 3% through the construction period. So that offsets the difference between that and sort of a drawdown facility. The difference being the drawdown facility, obviously you don't incur interest on any amount until you actually spend it, and that reduces your interest cost during the construction period. But the preferable one right now, because of where short-term interest rates are, would be to reinvest the construction account and then offset to a large degree the amount of interest that you incur during construction. So, as I said, that's the option that we intend to go out with. The ordinance maintains flexibility. It does authorize both a bond transaction and a bank financing, but our intent is to go out with the prepayable anytime bank financing, while concurrently also soliciting the banks to give us a reinvestment rate on the construction account.
So what's the implication if, as Commissioner suggested, there's federal money out there, there might even be some state money that's available a year from now? We've spent out the $2.8 million of it. the project is complete and then we find out later we can apply $1 million toward it, what happens then in the bank financing?
You could apply that $1 million to pay down the loan that you've borrowed so that you only effectively are borrowing what you need. You wouldn't be limited to prepaying the entire loan. You could prepay a portion of the loan if you receive something less than the $3 million.
How limited are we on what we use it for? I mean, if we're the sports complex, or if we don't use it all on the airport, can we use it on something else? Economic development?
Generally speaking, yeah, you could
911
use it for any other tax-exempt eligible project. Now, I would recommend, if you were to do that, that you would amend the ordinance or adopt something formally that states, we borrowed money for this purpose, but we're actually going to use it for this. Borrowers don't generally care because the debt is secured by the taxing authority of the county and not by the project itself. So they don't care. The IRS doesn't care so long as you're using it for a tax-exempt eligible project. But the prudent course of action would just be to formally recognize that you've spent it on something else.
So we're not locked into just using it. I mean, the document specifies it's for the airport. So we're not locked into just using it for the airport. Do we need something in that ordinance that we approve for the bond issue to have?
I would say not, unless you absolutely already know that you could spend a portion of the proceeds on that. I think as long as it's sort of up in the air, you approve the ordinance for the expected project. If it comes to pass that you receive funding from the state or federal or wherever that takes care of the airport project, then you've identified your other need, whether it's 911, whether it's the sports fields, and just amend the ordinance at that point.
And you're proposing we draw down the entire $3,065,000, and then in 6 months, if we only use $2 million, don't have anything to use it for, we can pay off $1 million.
Correct.
So this ordinance would just borrow the money. In order for us to actually give the money to the airport, there'd be another vote? Or would this be the vote for both?
Well, you already have one interlocal agreement that said you would fund $2.8 million plus the sewer project. And so some of the costs are already, of course, set for the parking lots and the terminal. The sewer's a bit of an unknown. We have some grant money that came in, but there's going to be some other expenses associated with that. It's hard for me to zero in on what the exact dollar is going to be, but I think given the nature of how this is structured, say you only spent $2.8 million when the dust settled, part of it we could just prepay it back. So the money we have sitting in the interest account would just go back to prepay without, or pay back without penalty, that unused portion. We could do that as well.
Well, I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not suggesting that we don't keep our word. We've signed an agreement. I fully intend to vote to say, yes, let's pay this. But I guess my question is the vote on this ordinance,
It just gets.
will that also be the vote that says, and when the money comes in, we're going to write the check to the airport and here it is? Or will they come back and say, all right, guys, you borrowed the money, we've got it now we need you to authorize the payment to the airport?
Well, I suppose we could do that. I mean, our plan was we would, since, the other reason to do this is we did not provide in this year's budget fund, because we plan on expending $2.8 million or more in the next 7 months, that we would, and we didn't plan for that in the budget. This would have provided us budgeted funds, and then we would have ran those through the bills. So at every fiscal court meeting, as we presented you invoices, we would have had money to pay for that. So the short answer is yes, you get to vote on it again, but I don't think maybe as open and notoriously is what you're suggesting.
Well, and here's where I'm wanting to do. I'm wanting to have a conversation with the airport that addresses how do we make sure we don't get to this spot again, in which I think all four of us are pretty disappointed with how that worked out, in which we're advocating with people at the state to take this cross from us, and what ends up happening is there ends up being a conversation basically between Senator Danny Carroll and the airport manager, and new projects get identified that we've never heard about, never vetted. Board of directors of the airport's never heard of. The committee raising money for the airport never heard of. And in addition, there was no phone call to the county judge to say, hey, we're thinking about doing this instead of that. How would that affect? There essentially was no cooperation on that issue. How do we keep an airport that we own half of from doing that to us again? And I say that, saying I say that with all this in mind. I really like Dennis and what he's done for airport. I am very happy with the fact we've got this terminal grant. Couldn't be happier. Love the fact that we're about to be flying Charlotte. So while I'm unhappy with this small issue, which is not small, because it means all of us are now $6 million more in debt than we would be had we done it the way we thought was going to happen. So it's something to be a little ticked about if I go up to Frankfurt as anybody's lawyer and come back and say, well, we decided to do something else, and guess what, you still owe $6 million. There's probably going to be a lawsuit against me if I do that in my legal capacity. How can we ask the airport, can we ask them essentially to enter a non-compete agreement that says, don't do this again, or if you're going to do this again, will you maybe let us know you're doing it so we can at least have a counter conversation?
Yes, and I think you can, and I think my recommendation to you would be to do it the way I discussed with you earlier.
I know, but
Not
that wasn't a public conversation, so I'm asking you for the public conversation.
Not with these funds. So we have a number of other ways we support the airport that is totally at the fiscal court's discretion, in addition to some cash we put into the airport. We collect a car rental tax, and we take 100% of those proceeds, and you designate those for the airport. You're not required to do that. You do that purely at your own discretion. So, and the county has not traditionally had, in exchange for the money, I need you to do things like not compete with us in lobbying for federal or state funds.
Or at least let us know you're doing it.
Disclose that.
Yeah. Well, I see doing it that way, but I mean, I want to do it in a way that doesn't make, Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Barlowman, Commissioner Parker, mean old commissioners that are holding back money from the airport and, putting the whole operation in jeopardy. And this seems like a good time to elevate the conversation of, well, couldn't we have an interlocal agreement, contract for services with the airport that put this duty upon them?
Yes.
It doesn't sound hard, and I don't know why they wouldn't sign it. We continue to subsidize you on the condition that you don't go to Frankfurt and lobby against us.
So downstream of this action that you're considering tabling is we have to have a second reading. We have to have a public hearing. The state local debt officer has to have a hearing that is hard to schedule, has been for 2 years. And then Mark has to schedule a day he takes bids from banks. Mark told me earlier the Fed is scheduling meetings in November and December, which the last 2 times they met rate increases. So
I guess the bottom line is that we're going to pay the airport somewhere close to $3 million because we signed an interlocal agreement.
Sure.
Well, then why are we?
The moment you sign the interlocal agreement for the funding.
Now, we can pay that bond with their car taxes if we so desire.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this seems like an appropriate time to pause and say, hey, listen, we'd like to have this conversation, but I don't know. I know you and Commissioner Barton were talking about it, and I think it should be said here, the grant that was received last week, Commissioner Barton put a lot of work in. I'm sure there were other people as well, but I know you were working hard on it, and that at least sounds like it may reduce part of the airport costs that we have to bear. Is that possible?
So I had that discussion with John and with Dennis. So so what we did was, when you did the interlocal agreement, we may have had a little bit of a bust. And the bust was this. While we said that the amount the city and county would share was roughly $5.8 million, that was based entirely on the estimates that go back to December of last year for terminal and parking lots. It didn't include sewer. And then when, throughout the course of that, the city and county agreed to make the commitment to fund the sewer project. And we added language into the interlocal agreement. We didn't add any money.
Let me interrupt you 1 second. I think our agreement was to fund, if we had to, the design of the sewer project, but not fund the entire sewer project, wasn't it? Or am I wrong about that?
The highlighted part.
Okay.
It was for design and construction. Even though the 5.8 estimate did not include that number. And also what we also thought we knew at the time, and this has all changed, was that the sanitary sewer construction would lag the terminal by some time, if not at least a year or longer. And so through the efforts of several people, we have now identified and received grant. I don't know when the actual grant will pay off, and no design work has begun yet. So the design work has to be done, the project has to be let. I'm sure we're looking at more than a year before the sewer project will be completed. Mixed into some of Dennis's numbers, there might be some room in what we're borrowing and what we're paying out that we'll have some money to put towards that. But John wanted, reinforced to me, boy, this is based on today's guess, and we think borrowing money is in a volatile market. Civil construction projects are really volatile right now. I'm sure Mark is seeing those with his other clients. We think it's one number today, and how long it takes to get materials and even labor to do this has gone up substantially in the last 2 years. We don't expect that really to change in the next 2. So hopefully, or I think what John was really trying to tell me is I don't know that the grant is gonna hold the entire cost, and the city and county committed to that. So we're going to be the backstop, I'm afraid, on that project because of what we wrote into the interlocal agreement.
Well, I mean, it's the right thing to do with our money. Improving the sewer infrastructure out by the airport is just smart business from a county government standpoint. I mean, it's potential economic development upside. There's so many good things to talk about, and I know it always sounds like I'm mad about one thing, but I guess that's true. I'm mad about one thing, but I'm happy about 9 others.
My recommendation to you tonight is to adopt this on first reading. We have another reading to go. We've got two more weeks to pause with the airport, and if you don't get what you want out of that in the next 2 weeks, then we can start adjusting dates down. But I will also remind you of this too. Sometimes you guys only decide to meet one time in November, and for sure you only typically meet one time in December. So from today, we've only got 3 scheduled meetings left. So if that schedule doesn't work out, we might have to have some called meetings.
Well,
I'll add this too, on that note. Once you have second reading and we start the process with the state and local debt officer, there's at least a 45 to 60 day window in there that we won't actually put this thing out for bid for interest rates. So there is time subsequent to the 24th for you guys to take action if something were to fall apart, or if the money came through or whatever, that wouldn't necessitate us even taking bids on the financing.
We're going to need the $3 million regardless. I mean, they're going to use it. The airport's going to use it, and we're obligated to pay it. So
I get that, but it's also,
there's no reason to hold them up then.
Well, there's a time when people will have conversations, and because they need you, There's a time when they don't need you and they'll ignore you. And I guess my question to you is, would you be willing, and I think we're all interested in having some sort of agreement with the airport where this doesn't happen again, would you be willing to raise that topic with the airport?
I certainly am willing to do that.
I want to continue the discussion on this, and I appreciate it. I've learned a lot from what you said, and I want to withdraw my motion to table.
All right. Withdraw the motion.
If any withdrawals.
Okay.
Okay.
All right,
Now we're
motion's
back to our
withdrawn.
reading papers.
Read away.
But I want to have more discussion after she reads.
All right.
Summary of ordinance. The Fiscal Court of the County of McCracken, Kentucky, at irregular meetings held on October 10, 2022, and October 24, 2022, adopted an ordinance titled as follows. An ordinance of the County of McCracken, Kentucky, authorizing the issuance of its County of McCracken, Kentucky General Obligations Bonds, Series 2022B, in an aggregate maximum principal amount of $3,065,000 for the purpose of financing the cost of the acquisition, construction, installation, and equipping of a new terminal building, aircraft parking apron, taxiway, and related improvements at the Barkley Regional Airport, approving the form of the bonds, authorizing the execution and delivery of the bonds, authorizing and directing the filing of a notice with the state local debt officer, providing for the payment and security of the bonds, establishing a sinking fund and bond payment fund for the bonds, authorizing acceptance of the bid of the purchaser of the bonds, and repealing inconsistent ordinances. The ordinance authorizes the issuance of a series of general obligation bonds designated as general obligation bonds, Series 2022B, called the bonds, by the County of McCracken, Kentucky, noted as the county, for the purpose of financing all or a portion of the cost of the acquisition, construction, installation, and equipping of a new terminal building, aircraft parking apron, taxiway, and related improvements at the Barkley Regional Airport, paying capitalized interest of the bonds if desirable, paying all or a portion of the cost of credit enhancement of the bonds, if any, and paying all or a portion of the cost of issuance of the bonds. Provisions are made in the ordinance for the payment of the bonds and the security therefore, for the application of the proceeds of the bonds, for the establishment of a bond payment fund, for the continuation of the county's previously established sinking fund, and for certain covenants of the county with respect to the bonds. The bonds are to be sold at public competitive sale and shall mature or be subject to mandatory sinking fund redemption in varying amounts on November 1, 2023, and each November 1 thereafter through November 1, 2034. The bonds pledge the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the county, and provision is made for the collection of a tax to pay the principal of and interest of the bonds, subject to certain credits as provided in Section 17 of the ordinance. The sale of the bonds is contingent upon the satisfaction of the requirements and conditions of the county regarding the project. As required by KRS Section 83A.060, the following Section 17 of the ordinance is set forth in its entirety. Section 17, General Obligation. The bonds shall be full general obligations of the county, and for the payment of the bonds and the interest thereon, the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the county are hereby pledged for the prompt payment thereof. During the period the bonds are outstanding, there shall be and there hereby is levied on all of the taxable property in the county, in addition to all other taxes, without limitation as to rate, a direct tax annually in an amount sufficient to pay the principal of and interest on the bonds, and when is due. It is hereby found and determined that the current tax rates of the county are within all applicable limitations. The tax shall be and is hereby ordered, computed, certified, levied, and extended upon the tax duplicate and collected by the same officers in the same manner and at the same time that taxes for general purposes for each of the years are certified, extended, and collected. The tax shall be placed before and in preference to all other items and for the full amount thereof, provided, however, that in each year, to the extent that the other lawfully available funds of the county are available for the payment of the bonds and are appropriated for such purpose, the amount of such direct tax upon all of the taxable property in the county shall be reduced by the amount of such other funds so available and appropriated. The undersigned Fiscal Court Clerk of the McCracken County, Kentucky hereby certifies that the foregoing summary of the ordinance of the County of McCracken, Kentucky was approved by the Fiscal Court for the first reading on October 10, 2022, and for the second reading on October 24, 2022, and was further approved by publication following adoption according to law.
So moved.
Second.
So that's our first reading. We'll have it back on the agenda then for the 24th, is it?
Yes, sir.
I want to discuss it some more too, if we could.
Oh, you want to discuss it now?
And we have to approve that too, right?
Yeah.
No, we've had the first reading. We don't have to vote on it.
I mean, it says in here that it says in here there was approved by the Fiscal Court for the first reading on October 10th, so we'll have to vote on it to approve the first reading. That's what the ordinance says, right?
Yes.
We have to vote on the first reading. Approve it, okay.
Yeah.
Pardon?
All right. Did you want to discuss it?
Yeah, I wanted to expand a little bit. I hate to drag it out more. I want to expand a little bit on what Commissioner Jones said. The background of the airport funding was that the state gave the airport $5 million, 3 years ago to help fund the construction. And at that time, when the governor came down, he committed to help come with more funds to cover the local share, which was $6 million. In his budget proposal announced in January of this year, I think it was January, he announced that he was allocating $6 million for the airport to cover the local share, which would have covered the $3 million by the city and the $3 million by the county. That announcement was somewhat, at least privately, criticized by our legislators, who said it was purely political on the governor's standpoint, that he was trying to allocate money for the airport, and it probably was political. If it was, that's fine, but it was going to save the taxpayers of McCracken County and the taxpayers of the city of Paducah $6 million for other projects that we need to get done. Initially, there was some comments by legislators that they were not going to approve any funding for the airport. And there was a meeting at the Chamber of Commerce that there was, it got pretty heated between Senator Carroll and the judge, and over the funding. And after that, they finally made a commitment they would seek funding. And the thought was that the funding would be to cover the construction of the terminal at the airport. But then when they approved $5.3 million or 5.4, whatever it was, $5.2 million, they said it could not be used for the terminal project. And it's my view that that was a total political decision, because they didn't want the governor to get any credit for helping to fund the airport. And I believe that from the comments made and from emails and texts I got from legislators that was the sole reason why. One of the, I think there were 3 or 4 projects that they said would be funded with the money from the state. One of them was a sewer project, but I talked to some of the state officials in the aeronautics division, and they said that the money for that grant, it was funds to help pay for airport projects, and that money could not be used for anything off the airport. So that $5.2 or $3 million, none of those funds could be used to cover any of the sewer construction. And when that happened, there was effort made to file grants elsewhere with the Delta Regional Authority to help fund the sewers. So even if that grant money was not available, the money from the state that was approved as part of the aeronautics budget could not be used to cover the sewers. So there's I think it was $2.25 million in the list that the airport gave to Senator Carroll. $2.25 million was to be used for sewer construction, but that would be freed up now because it couldn't be used for that. The next project in line was to cover costs of the terminal project, so it would seem reasonable that that $2.25 million could be allocated for the terminal project to help reduce our share of what we have to put in there. Also, in addition, since this airport terminal construction project began, the federal government has approved a infrastructure program to help fund different projects. And in that infrastructure fund, there's a lot of money in there for airport construction and airport projects. And in the meeting I was at in Denver, Colorado with the National Association of Counties, I met briefly with FAA officials who were there to discuss the infrastructure funds, and they said the type of projects, they obviously didn't make any commitments, but from a global view, the type of projects I discussed at the airport were exactly what they were looking for, and they were competitive grants, and that that obviously there was a good shot that they would get some. So in this, there's $14.98 billion for infrastructure grants for airports. There's $5 million for terminal programs, and there's $1 billion a year for 5 years that the airport could apply for to help maybe recover some of the terminal construction costs. And then there's other money in there to help pay for, there's a project in there for runway expansion. There's extra money in there that could help get those. So I really think that, I think we all support the airport. We're all going to meet whether our commitment is $1.5 million or $3 million, whatever it is, we're going to approve that to help fund the airport. But I think we really need to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money of McCracken County and look for other ways to pay those costs from other funding sources. And Commissioner Jones and I have a meeting with the Transportation Secretary in 2 weeks to discuss the funding that was approved, and we hope we can get some kind of a resolution and some kind of advice on how we can earmark the state grant that was approved by the legislature. Some of that money can be earmarked for the terminal project to help relieve the citizens of McCracken County.
One little, maybe minor correction. It was Representative Bridges and I that had our discussion. You want to call it a discussion?
Is that what it was, a discussion?
I think he was.
I'm sorry,
he was representing.
But there also was some heated words during that debate with Governor Carroll, with Governor Carroll, with Senator Carroll. But the real discussion was with Representative Bridges. I apologize for that.
The bottom line is, all of us have a fiduciary duty to the taxpayers of McCracken County to try and do this at the cheapest price. And I just feel like, well, we didn't drop the ball, but the ball was dropped. The touchdown pass was thrown to the end zone, and it was dropped. And if it gets thrown again, I hope somebody catches it.
Now, you've fallen into all that more than did I, but when say that the airport lobbied against us, my understanding, maybe I'm wrong about it, but my understanding was that a legislator asked Dennis Rouleau, are there any other projects you would like to do out there? And he listed those projects, and I don't know what the length of the discussion was, but then the result of all that was that the money was put into those other projects. So
yeah, I think you're right. I don't know that it was, lobby is probably an overreach, but as this issue is on the table, the state senator asked the airport, hey, what projects do you need money for? And the one project we've all been screaming for, trying to raise money for, which is the terminal grant, was listed fourth behind three other projects. Those three other projects totaled $5.3 million. Those three projects end up getting approved, and the rationale that was expressed was, well, you guys had already committed to spend the $6 million, so we wanted to do something different. I just don't think a client of mine would accept that answer if I told him you still owe $6 million, even though I had an opportunity to get you out of it. So.
And it also needs to be pointed out, too, that the legislation did not specify how the money would be spent. It was just a side list that was held by our state senator.
I don't know at that point, and I think that's the issue. I don't know that Dennis had an obligation to call you and say, hey, listen, the state senators ask about projects. I'm thinking about putting 1, 2, and 3 ahead of the one project you're really working hard to get, Judge. What do you think about that? And that's what I wanted. That's what I'm asking Steve Doolittle to start a conversation about. I want a contractual duty that the next time it happens, Dennis says, wait a minute, Senator, I got to run this by the county judge. They give us money every month. They own half the airport. I'll get right back to you. And essentially, we create cooperation by contract.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, that carries on the first
Thank you
reading.
for indulging our concern.
All right, we've got an executive session to do. Let's see, the purpose of the executive session would be under KRS 61.810(1)C, proposed or pending litigation. Did we ever, we had something else for executive, but I don't.
Yes, something we needed to advise from our attorneys.
Okay. Well, is that going to fall under the litigation as well?
That's going to fall under the exception for any other subject matter made mandatory to discuss in closed session by other acts of Congress or general assembly.
Okay.
Should be on there.
I don't think I have that on my list. But for the purposes that the county attorney just stated, I don't have the KRS for that.
It's essentially preservation of the attorney-client privilege under KRS 500.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was on there too, but I don't see it. All right. All right, so the motion to go to,
So made.
any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. We won't, let's see, are we going to take any action when we come back? Probably won't. We won't have it decided how we want the outcome of this to be, I don't think. So let's do is there a motion to adjourn when we reconvene from executive? Yeah. And a second. All in favor, aye. Opposed, no. All right, when we come back from executive, we'll just adjourn and that'll be it.